I'm Ronnie, and this is my story. I would say by the age of 12 or 13, which would have been approximately 7th grade, I began getting into a lot of trouble. I got introduced to drugs and alcohol at this time. I got introduced to narcotics, pills, hallucinogens, some of the heavier drugs like cocaine. My life was riddled with trips to the hospital from overdoses, trips to the psych ward. And then on July the 11th of 2010 is when I hit my ultimate rock bottom. I talked my best friend at the time into drinking, into going to the bar that night. We're having a good time, you know, we're sitting there joking with the waitress there, and I just remember us having a really good time, which was strange because I had been living many years not having a good time in my addiction. You know, just trying to chase the next high, chase the next drink, and I was just not getting any fulfillment out of it. So this one particular night, I remember just, you know, being able to laugh with him again. And then, boom, I black out. Well, the next thing I know, I'm waking up and I see these really bright lights in front of me. And I look down in front of me and I see that my legs are just flayed open. And there's actually a surgeon pulling shards of glass and stuff out of my legs. And my first thought in my addiction was, I want to get high, you know? So I start telling the doctor that, you know, I'm suffering from a lot of pain. I'm trying to make it look bad. Oh, don't do that. And he quickly checks me and tells me that, for one, you're medicated enough. For two, I mean, you just reek of alcohol. And then for three is that, and I'll never forget this, he looked over at me and he said, what you really need to be worried about is the fact that your best friend's not breathing right now. And he had to get air back to a different hospital. It felt like it wasn't reality. I don't even know how to describe that. The best way I could sum it up is I was in shock. My dad, on his way to my best friend's hospital, ended up stopping by mine. He left my room briefly to make a phone call, came back. You could tell he was fighting back emotion. He sat on my hospital bed and he said, you know, I'm sorry to tell you, but they just took Mike off of life support and he's dead. All of a sudden, my best friend's gone. I have no closure. I don't see him. I don't see how he looks on life support. I don't see any of that. About a year after the accident happened, I was going to court. I got sentenced to 8 years in the Department of Corrections. It got worse before it got better. My first 5 years in prison got really dark. I actually went further into my addiction than I ever had. It got to the points where you know, I probably had been high or under the influence every day on something for multiple years in a row. During this time, they're having a lot of drug tests. A lot of people are telling on different people, and people are having to do urine analysis, and they're dropping dirty, so they get 6-month setbacks, get sent to the hole. And I remember thinking, man, I'm doing 7 years flat on this. I can't do any more time. So I remember every time at 11 o'clock when they'd come to do the roll call to sign people up to do the urine analysis, I would be on my knees, you know, and I'd be praying to God, Lord, please just let this CO pass up my cell. If you do that, I'll sign up for a church service. Funny thing is, you know, God answered those prayers, and I prayed them so much that before I knew it, I was going to 6 different church services a week. Every time that I left, no matter how bad I didn't want to go to the service that night, I always left feeling better. And then at a certain point, I started wanting to go. And then at a certain point, it became my refuge and I couldn't wait to go. Another brother who led the worship, he came up to me one service and he was like, hey man, I want you to sing in our choir. And I was like thinking, are you crazy, dude? Like, for one, I can't sing a lick, you know what I mean? And two, I'm scared to death of being in front of people, you know? So, but for some reason, the Holy Spirit just gave me the ability to say yes. I said yes. And I remember one of my buddies, Eddie, looked over at me and he was like, man, he kept trying to hand me the microphone and I just wanted to get away from it. I was scared of it. He was like, you better get ready, bro, because, you know, God raises up leaders and soon enough, you're gonna be giving your testimony on that thing, so get ready. Eventually, I succumbed to it and told him that I'd give my testimony, share my testimony there in the chapel. I did. I was a nervous wreck. I mean, I was literally shaking. I continued to tell God yes in this season of my life. Had been telling him no, had been avoiding him, you know, my whole life. I had been in the church body, in the choir for a while, still smoking cigarettes. But God met me right in that mess. By April 25th, 2016, I either came back from an event or a church service, and I was just like, the Holy Spirit gave me the strength to just be like, I'm done. Like, I got rid of the pills that I had in there, and I was just done getting high. I had been a guy that was scared to death of the camera. I was scared to death of the microphone. I was scared to death to be in people's vision, to just be out in the open. I was scared to death to be that guy. And so God was bringing me out of that, and He was showing me how He could still use me even despite my weaknesses. And no matter how weak I was, like His power and His glory like could just be amplified in my weakness. By the time I got released in July 23rd of 2018, I had 2 years of sobriety. I was heavily involved in accountability programs, working through the steps, contacting a sponsor, and really just walking it out daily to maintain my spiritual sobriety. That's how the Lord got me sober, and that's how the Lord has kept me sober since. For that, I'm grateful. And I began, my transition out here on the streets. Within my first couple days, I was at Connect Church, which was a church body that came into the prison and did prison ministry. I had hit it off with the pastor, Pastor Chris, and I just told him, like, man, I really feel like I'm called to just be a part of your church body. Since my release, I've just tried to give back to recovery groups. I'm heavily involved in Celebrate Recovery and a handful of other meetings. When I look back on my life, and especially the accident, and I try to find meaning and understanding for being responsible for the death of my best friend, getting involved with different ministries like recovery and churches on the streets helps me feel like, I'm bringing meaning to the death of my best friend. I've been able to start seeing past the lies of Satan, start seeing past the fact of being, rejected, suffering from all these various different mental disorders and stuff like that, to being used by God and being able to see the things that God has gifted me, the things that God can do through me, and to have confidence, not in me, but in the God in me. Through my weakness and through all the lies and all those things that have infiltrated my mind, that His light, His light force penetrated that. It inhabits me in such a way that I can be used by God. I can be used by my Creator. And not only can I be used, but I can be used in a mighty way that transforms people's lives. All I really know, and what I have an incredibly difficult time understanding, is that I invited Jesus into my life, and He began doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. I'm Ronnie, and this is my story.